Welcome to Global Lecture Series of Tokyo Metropolitan University. Tokyo Metropolitan University offers special lectures this year, following last year's, to cultivate a global perspective that will enable students to play active roles in a turbulent international society. This year, we have a special lecture for high school students. Tokyo Metropolitan University is the only comprehensive university established by Tokyo Metropolitan Government and has approximately 9,000 students. The university values its ties with Tokyo Metropolitan Government and the people of Tokyo, and advances basic and applied research in a wide range of fields. The mission is to pursue the idea of human society in a large city. The university engages in city-based education and research unique to Tokyo. We now start today's lecture. Today is the dialogue style by Professor Michael Osborne and Professor Miyamoto Hiroaki. Mr. Osborne is a professor of machine learning in the Department of Engineering Science at University of Oxford. Mr. Miyamoto is a professor of Faculty of Economics and Business Administration at Tokyo Metropolitan University. Today's theme is the future of employment. What automation will mean for future employment. First, Professor Osborne will give me lecture about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. Then, next the dialogue will start. Now, please start your lecture. Professor Osborne, please.
Thank you very much. So I'm just sharing my screen. And thank you very much, firstly, for this invitation. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm delighted that so many students may have the chance to engage with this topic. But if I might begin with a quick self-introduction. As you've heard, I'm a professor of machine learning in the University of Oxford, in which I lead a team of 10 students and postdocs, focusing on, in particular, Bayesian machine learning. I thought I might also mention that I'm the co-founder of a spin-out from the University of Oxford called MindFoundry, which focuses on AI for high-stakes problems, particularly those in government and insurance. And MindFoundry currently comprises a team of about 60. We've raised about £31 million to date. And actually, our last lead investor was a Japanese company, IOI Nissei Dowa Insurance. So with that out of the way, forgive me for diving into my talk. So my topic for today is the future of automation, how AI might affect the future of work. And as I've mentioned, my background is in the technical aspects of machine learning and AI. I actually work as an engineer developing these algorithms. And I'm known to many of my friends and colleagues as being a booster for AI. I work in this field because fundamentally I believe that it is a core tool for human flourishing, for our future prosperity. So it came as a bit of surprise to said colleagues when a couple of years ago now, my name started appearing in news pieces with headlines claiming that almost half of jobs may be stolen by robots. So there is some truth to that claim. It emerged from a series of papers that I wrote with an economist, Carl Frey, in particular finding that almost half of Japanese jobs is at high risk of automatability, high risk of technology emerging that may automate most of those jobs. But there's much more to say on this topic. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of context that needs to be brought to bear, all of which I hope I will be able to provide during this talk, or at least some thereof. And this topic of automation is very much back on the agenda at the moment due to the pandemic. So during the pandemic, a lot of firms, because they wanted to reduce human contact, perhaps also reduce costs, looked at ways to introduce automation. To give some examples, on the slide you see a Japanese hotel that was allowing guests to check themselves in with a robot. We've also seen attempts to automate work increase in spaces ranging from manufacturing, meat packing in grocery stores. And in addition to that direct incentive for more automation, we've also seen an indirect push towards more automation due to the fact that consumers seem to be switching more and more to more automated services. So one example of that is actually found in exactly how I am giving this talk today, which is over Zoom. So of course, giving this talk over Zoom means that I didn't create employment for a taxi driver to drive me to the airport, for flight staff, for hotel staff in Tokyo. Conducting meetings, conducting talks over Zoom is an instance of automation, and more people are meeting and talking in this way rather than in person as a result of the pandemic. Also due to the pandemic, we've seen more and more consumers switching to grocery delivery over shopping in bricks and mortar grocery stores. And again, that's a form of automation. In the UK, the front runner in grocery delivery is probably Ocado, which more than any other firm has invested heavily in robotics and a really high technology app in order to deliver its groceries to our homes. So with more consumers preferring Ocado relative to shopping in stores, the economy as a whole has become more automated. And the final example of this type is from the US, where we've seen consumers switching to Sam's Club away from Whole Foods. So while this might not at first sight have any bearing on automation, consider that Whole Foods employs about 6 workers for every $1 million worth of sales, whereas Sam's Club, which makes much more use of automation, is able to employ only 2 workers for every $1 million of sales. So again, with more consumers preferring Sam's Club rather than Whole Foods, less employment for humans is required in the economy overall, thus introducing automation. And probably the core technology driving much of this modern automation is drawn from my own field, that of machine learning, a subfield within artificial intelligence. And what's interesting about machine learning, what differentiates it from previous waves of automation, is that it allows the definition of the task to be performed through data. So in practice, what that means is that you might record a human doing a task many, many times, and then use those recordings to teach an algorithm to do the task in the place of the human. To give a concrete example, consider the task of face classification, which is recognizing the identity of a face in an image. For a long time, this was thought to be non-automatable because, of course, humans are very good at recognizing faces, and it wasn't clear that an algorithm would be able to do so as well as a human. But back in 2014, kicking off the current era of deep learning, Facebook announced its algorithm DeepFace, which was in fact able to do this task of classifying faces with accuracy even greater than many humans. And the way that DeepFace performed its task, the way that it learned to recognize faces, was very much driven by this machine learning paradigm of big data. So DeepFace was trained on about 4 million images of faces. And keeping that number in mind, I'd like to make a comparison to how humans do this task of recognizing faces. And with apologies, I've included on the slide one of my current favorite human beings, our second child, at an age at which he was 2 months. So at 2 months of age, he had had about 4 million seconds of life, if I've done my sums right. And so if you assume that he was getting about 1 image per second, and if you additionally assume that he wasn't sleeping too much, which unfortunately I have to tell you was not too drastic an approximation to reality, at 2 months of age, our son had about 4 million images of training data, if you like, which is exactly the same number that was sufficient for DeepFace, that face classification algorithm from Facebook, to recognize faces. And I would say, albeit as a doting parent, that at 2 months of age, our son was also able to recognize faces. But crucially, he had learned how to do that in a way that's completely different to the way that DeepFace, the machine learning algorithm, had learned to recognize faces. So keep in mind that for every face that DeepFace sees, there's a neat little bounding box surrounding the face. All the faces were provided at the same image resolution and all were neatly lit and easy to recognize in a sense. So DeepFace had access to really crisp training data, really well-defined, precise data, whereas humans learn to do tasks such as recognizing faces from a sort of undifferentiated mass of photons coming into our eyes, simultaneous with phonons coming into our ears. So humans learn to do tasks in messy, complex environments. Algorithms still require a great deal of structure and clarity in order to perform a task. Yet nonetheless, they are able to do very exciting stuff using this approach of learning from data. And some of the things that algorithms have been doing are already touching on the world of work, probably nowhere more so than in retail, sales and service jobs. So the 10,000-pound gorilla in this space is probably Amazon, which is very upfront about the fact that it is an AI machine learning driven company. And they've made public statements such as, for instance, 1 in every 3 sales on their e-commerce platform having been driven by a machine learning recommendation engine. But they're not stopping there in their use of machine learning. Amazon is also using machine learning and AI to drive its warehousing and delivery operations. And it's even at the heart of their shift into bricks and mortar retail. So in the middle of the slide, you can see an Amazon Go store in San Francisco, which I had the privilege of visiting a couple of years ago now. And the way that these stores work is that you can simply walk in, take whatever you want from the shelf and walk out again, because your every move has been observed by cameras overhead, which, running computer vision, machine learning, AI algorithms, are able to detect that it was you that had picked up any particular item, so that they can charge your Amazon account for whatever you had decided to purchase. So a completely frictionless shopping experience, one that's very attractive. And the final thing I wanted to flag on the slide was a Xeos tablet that is increasingly found on the tables of restaurants such as Applebee's and Chili's in the US. And what these tablets are able to do is take orders, take payment, even make recommendations if you sign into the tablet in a way that's very much automating the work of a waiter or waitress. Now, that's interesting in that, of course, these tablets aren't doing everything that a waiter or waitress does because they're not able to bus dishes around the restaurant. But in other respects, they might have some advantages over the human waiter or waitress, in that in some of the restaurants where these tablets were deployed, it turned out that some consumers, some diners, were a little bit shy about admitting their desire for a really heavy cheesecake dessert. But if they did not have to admit that desire to a human weight person, but only tap the appropriate button on the tablet, they ordered a lot more cheesecakes. So in restaurants where these forms of automation have been introduced, dessert orders have gone up sometimes to the tune of 20 or 30%. Whether or not that's an advantage, of course, depends on whether or not you're the restaurant owner or a customer who's potentially worried about their waistline. So I've talked about Amazon quite a bit. I want to turn to another of their uses of AI, perhaps a less attractive one, which is in its human resources operation. So in 2018, an attorney representing Amazon admitted that several hundred workers at one of its facilities, which only employs 2,500 workers, were fired due to an AI algorithm deciding that they were insufficiently productive. So that's a fairly alarming thing. So a huge fraction of the workforce in this facility was turned over due to the workforce being monitored by algorithms, and those algorithms deciding that they were not good enough. And if that doesn't already strike you as a little bit alarming, a little bit creepy, I'd like to point out that in 2018, Amazon was also forced to admit that an algorithm it was using not for firing, but for hiring, was fundamentally sexist. It was biased against women. So my point here is that when these algorithms are used for tasks that have real impact on people's lives, when it's not simply something as cute as recognizing a face, we have to be very careful in the introduction of automation. Another example now, another Japanese example. Perhaps you already know Ima, but if not, Ima is a Tokyo fashion model who, like many models today, is touting the wares of the brands that sponsor her on social media, in particular on Twitter, on Instagram. And she gets paid simply for posting photos on her social media. That is her job in a sense. So all I've said so far is fairly standard for fashion models today. The only interesting thing about Ima is that she's not actually a person. Ima is the creation of a computer graphics company based in Tokyo, which produces these images of a person without there actually being such a person in reality. And because this person is generated by an algorithm, they can have Ima, the person, wear absolutely whatever their clients want, whatever the brands that pay the money want Ima to wear. I should mention at this point that fashion models were an occupation we'd considered all the way back in 2017, so as to try and describe that occupation's probability of automatability using the predictions made by another machine learning algorithm. And at that time, back in 2017, we'd found fashion models to be one of the most automatable occupations. And many media interviewers at the time had expressed some confusion about that probability of 98% for fashion models. They'd thought that, in fact, fashion models might be quite safe from automation. So it's quite vindicating to a few years later now, seeing these AI fashion models emerging, validating some of the results of our earlier analysis. Another example now from earlier this year, which was the announcement from DeepMind of AlphaCode, which isn't just doing routine work, it's doing something that's traditionally considered quite high-skilled work, which is computer programming. So AlphaCode uses data gathered from a range of competitive programming competitions on the web in order to produce code on the basis of a natural language description of what the code should do. And after the algorithm was trained up, it was actually put into some of these international programming competitions, in particular those from Code Forces, which attracts tens of thousands of participants from across the world, and was found to do better than almost half of those real human competitive programmers. So this is quite an impressive achievement. Whether or not it actually has impact on the real world, on real programmers, is yet to be seen, because of course, programmers have throughout their history designed tools that automate away work that they themselves had previously done. But if nothing else, it's extremely impressive. So far I've just been talking about machine learning brains, if you like, automating work. But now I thought I might talk about examples in which those brains have been put into robotic bodies. And perhaps no such application has been talked more about than self-driving taxis. And self-driving taxis are a real thing. So Waymo, which is a subdivision of Alphabet, the Google parent company, is doing open to the public trial as we speak in Phoenix, Arizona, and in San Francisco. And these robots are again very much the result of a big data AI approach. So they're using sensors to gather lots and lots of data in order to work out where they are and where they should go next. And while they are really impressive, there are still some caveats that need to be noted about what they can and can't do. The first thing to say is that at present, Waymo hasn't disclosed how many of its vehicles operate without so-called safety drivers. That is, without a human actually at the wheel who would take over in the case of anything unforeseen happening. So while they might be self-driving, it doesn't mean at present that they're actually reducing employment, in that many of these vehicles still need a human at the wheel to avoid the tragedies that have befallen many self-driven vehicles in recent years. The other thing worth noting is that the choice of locations for these trials in Arizona, in California, is not completely accidental, in that these are places that have relatively favorable weather conditions. So the driving environment that the vehicles have to contend with is relatively uniform throughout the year. There are also places with well-defined road networks. And they're a far cry from the driving environment in, say, central London, where there's a lot of congestion. There are unforeseen pedestrians and bicycles to worry about, and where the weather is certainly always a factor. So the point I want to make about self-driving vehicles is that it's not really a question about when they emerge, when they take over work. It's much more a question of where, in that some places where there is a lot of structure to the driving task, where there's not much weather or foreign objects to worry about, where safety is less of a concern, these vehicles will take over some human work in the very near future. Whereas in places like, let's say, inner city Tokyo or London, the task these vehicles have to solve is much more challenging and is much further away. Of course, there are many other places where we can impose a lot of structure on these vehicles in order to simplify the work that they have to do. And robots that navigate and perform work all by themselves are already being used in places as wide-ranging as hospitals, warehouses, factories, ports, even mine sites, due to the fact that in each of those cases, you can design the workplace in order to accommodate the needs of these robots. So with all of those examples out of the way, you might be forgiven for worrying what work remains for the humans, and in particular, what can you do right now in order to prepare for this future of work transformed by AI? Well, as it happens, we completed another study looking at which skills will be most in demand in the year 2030 and beyond. And our analysis there identified that future demand seems highly linked to advanced cognitive skills. So the top 9 skills are listed on the slide, and you can see that it includes everything from judgment and decision-making to fluency of ideas linked to the need of creativity, as well as things like systems analysis and systems evaluation, speaking to the future need for systems thinking about how work is to be done, combining the relative strengths of human and machine. And if I was to flag up the things that algorithms are absolutely not going to do in the relatively near future, the first so-called bottleneck to automation that I might describe is social intelligence. So algorithms, for all their sophistication, still don't really understand humans the way that we do. And as a result, they're limited to simple socially intelligent tasks like acting as chatbots. They're very far from doing things like negotiation or persuasion or mentoring. And the other bottleneck to automation that I'd like to identify is creativity, as I briefly mentioned in that list before. Creativity or originality is what you might think of as the cornerstone of what makes us human, our ability to innovate, to solve problems. And while again, algorithms are making great strides in this space, algorithms are becoming more creative, I think they're best thought of as a tool rather than as a replacement for human labor. On the example of the slide, I've got the example, on the slide, I've got the example of a script for a science fiction film, Sunspring, which was actually written by an AI, by a recurrent neural network, which was called Benjamin for some reason. And the way that this AI worked was very much in the usual data-driven paradigm. It was trained up on a very large number of science fiction scripts and was able to produce its own script, which was basically watchable. It was produced, it's available on YouTube for you to check for yourself. But it obviously didn't become a smash hit because fundamentally the AI here didn't understand really what humans like about films. It was only able to pick up some of the surface characteristics of such films. An even more impressive example, just from April this year, is DALL-E 2 from OpenAI, which is an algorithm able to generate images from textual descriptions. So on the slide here, I've got an astonishing demonstration, this from Benjamin Hilton on Twitter. So if you give DALL-E 2 the prompt, a Renaissance style painting of a modern supermarket aisle, in the aisle is a crowd of shoppers with shopping trolleys trying to get reduced items, it produces the image on the right, which you can see demonstrates actually fairly deep understanding of the language provided. It understood what was in that prompt and understood enough about what a Renaissance style painting looks like and what a shopping trolley looks like to produce the picture that you can see. So for me, DALL-E 2 is simply astonishing, and it's clear that progress in AI is continuing apace, but again, I have to flag some shortcomings of DALL-E 2. So the first thing to say is that to get interesting results out of DALL-E 2, we have to do a lot of work as prompt engineers. We have to design the text that's provided to DALL-E 2 to actually get something interesting that comes out. So you could argue that a lot of the creativity there resides in the prompt designer, the person who writes the text that's given to DALL-E 2, rather than in DALL-E 2 itself. And I might indicate the limitations to DALL-E 2's understanding with this prompt. So the prompt was a red cube on top of a yellow cube to the left of a green cube. And you can see that what DALL-E 2 has produced here has captured some of the elements of the prompt, but it's certainly not a red cube on top of a green, on top of a yellow cube. Instead, it's a red cube on top of a green cube. And another thing that DALL-E 2 seems simply unable to do is count. So if you ask it to produce one apple, it will produce an image of one apple. If you ask it to produce an image of two apples, it'll produce an image of two apples. But by the time you get up to 5 apples, it's losing track. It doesn't exactly know what 5 means. Here you can see 5 apples corresponds to an image of actually 6 apples. And beyond 5, it really has no idea of what those numbers mean. So DALL-E 2, for all its sophistication, really doesn't understand the world in the way that a human does. And to complete that point, I thought I might introduce an image from one of my favorite artists. This is Simon Stollenhog, who really understands not just how to make a picture of a land party superimposed with a giant robot in the background, giant robots, but has chosen those elements because he understands that they are elements that resonate with nerds like me, who may have spent much of their youth in big rooms playing on local area networks and having a great time. So he knows there's a sort of emotional resonance to his creations in a way that DALL-E 2 would simply never be able to comprehend. So with all that out of the way, I want to provide an historical example that is of laundresses, people whose job was to wash clothing. And in particular, I'd like you to consider the time series of employment for this occupation over the years 1850 to 1910. And you can see over that period of continued growth and prosperity, employment for this occupation kept growing. So in 1910, you might have thought that everything was rosy for this occupation. But also in 1910, A.J. Fisher was granted a patent for the first ever electric-powered washing machine, which resulted in fairly rapid declines in employment for this occupation, as it was effectively automated away. So I have a few points to make here. The first is that forecasting the future is hard, in that if you were looking just at this time series up to 1910, you would have struggled to predict what happened after 1910. The second point here is that, of course, automation is a real thing. The invention of new machines has always reduced employment in some occupations. But my third point, perhaps the most important one, is that the job that was automated away here was actually a really unpleasant one. It required these laundresses to take heavy loads of washing down to a river or some other source of water so as to wash it and then cart it back where it could be dried. The washing itself was also laborious. It required really heavy duty washing of the clothes in the water by hand. So when this washing machine that was powered by electricity came along, actually, I don't imagine there were too many laundresses who regretted not having to do that job anymore. So I think the deeper point here is that automation allows work to become more human. It automates away work that is non-social, non-creative, laborious, tedious, and routine, and leaves behind work that is actually more pleasurable and stimulating for us, I think. So with that lens, I would say, let's not lose sight of the fact that automation is actually a tool for human flourishing. And if I return to that study I'd mentioned, which looked at the future of skills, we also tried to provide an overall forecast, not just of which jobs were going to be automated, but taking into account all the other things that drive the future of work, including changes in globalization, the aging of our workforces, a switch towards more sustainable work. We arrived at the following figure, which shows that about 7 in 10 jobs are actually of uncertain prospects in the future. That is, only 2 in 10 jobs are likely to see a decrease in their employment, and 1 in 10 jobs likely to see an increase. So I've described for those 7 in 10 jobs that their future prospects are uncertain, but another and perhaps more productive way to make that same point is to say for those jobs, there is everything to play for. And fundamentally, that's how I view the future. Technology, including AI, is not an exogenous force that's acting upon us, forcing people out of work against the wishes of humanity. Instead, technology is a tool. It's something that we build to achieve our aims. And so when I think about the future, I think that really there is scope there for AI to be something that leads to better prospects for everyone, so long as we do it right, so long as we build the right technology and implement it within the right social paradigm. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Now, please proceed to discuss the future of empowerment. Professor Miyamoto, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike, for your very interesting presentations. Actually, I learned many things from your presentation. I did not know that, the AI did so many things, although there is some limitations. And I really enjoy your presentation. I had the opportunity to see your very beautiful son. And yeah, and I believe, our audience, today our audience is mainly high school students. They also enjoyed your presentation. They must be inspired. So today we will discuss the future of employment. This is a very interesting theme. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Perhaps before we start, it would be better for me to introduce myself to the audience. Mike, you already know me, but since audience does not know me, so let me introduce myself to the audience. Hello. So my name is Hiro Miyamoto. I'm a professor at the Tokyo Metropolitan University. I belong to the Faculty of Economics and Business Administration. My major is economics, especially macroeconomics, labor economics, and Japanese economy. And one of my research topic is to examine how technological progress affects the labor market. So actually today's discussion theme is what I'm doing now. And I joined the Tokyo Metropolitan University in 2020, so 2 years ago. Before that, I worked at the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in the United States as an economist. Okay, so shall we start, Mike? Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, so first, I have a question on your presentation. Specifically, I would like to seek your views on the impact of technological progress on job creations. So technological progress affects employment through two channels. One is job creation. The other one is job distractions. So today, in your presentation, you mainly focus on the impact of technological progress on the job distraction side. So by using Japanese data, you found that about half of Japanese workers faces risks that their job will be replaced by machines, robots, or AI, new technologies. This is very shocking numbers. And I think this finding is very interesting, and it has a lot of implications. But as I just mentioned, technological progress also affects job creations. For example, today, many people worked in IT related to industries. Google, Amazon, Twitter's very good example for that. They are very big company. But meantime, we have a small, medium-sized IT related to companies. And these companies generate a large number of jobs. This is because of internet was developed. So this is the one example that technological progress could create new types of jobs. So now I would like to know, how do you think the current what is the impact of current technological progress on the job creation? What would be net employment impact of technological progress?
Thank you for the absolutely terrific question. And I think I'd like to start with agreeing with your implicit point that technology does create jobs.
Right.
And of course it does. And, over the 20th century, we saw a completely profound change in the nature of work due to the agricultural revolution. So at the beginning of the 20th century, about 40% of workers were engaged in agriculture. Mm-hmm. At the end of the 20th century, that figure was less than 2%. And that was entirely due to technology. It was due to the internal combustion engine, resulting in tractors and so on, replacing the need for large teams of workers on farms. Mm-hmm. But what happened was that all those workers somehow found new jobs in factories and in offices in cities, so that the unemployment rate over the 20th century, at the beginning and end of the 20th century was about the same. We adapted in the end. Mm-hmm. So I think that point is true, even looking ahead. New jobs will be created. We're seeing new jobs created by AI already, data scientists and social media interns and so on. But there are reasons nonetheless to be worried. So I'll list a few of them. The first of which is that the timescales matter. So it could be that in the long run, enough jobs are created that everyone finds new work, but there could be a transition period that is really hard for a lot of people where there isn't enough work, say. The second point is that we do have to be humble in predicting the future. And just because things have been okay in the past, at least in the long run, doesn't mean that they'll necessarily be okay in the future.
Exactly.
We do have new types of technology now that are doing new things. We can't just rely on the historical record. A third reason to worry is that distribution matters. So maybe there are enough jobs overall, But if there are some sectors, if there are some people who really lose out, it could be that is something we'd nonetheless like to avoid. And the final concern is that work isn't just a binary, either you have it or not. The quality of work also matters. Issues like pay and working conditions are also things that could suffer as a result of AI. So to conclude, I agree with you that new jobs will be created. And I do believe actually that we should be pursuing AI for that reason alone. We will be generating new good forms of work and generating a lot of wealth. But nonetheless, there are some concerns that we must maneuver around in the process.
Thank you very much. Actually, I fully agree with you. In my field, economics, the relationship between technological progress and employment and unemployment has been studied for a long period. And there is theoretical studies and also empirical studies. And the data show that in the long term, technological progress could reduce unemployment because, as you mentioned, technological progress could generate many jobs in the long term. But in the short time period, some people may lose a job. That's why temporarily we may have a higher unemployment. This is what so far economics found. But as you just mentioned, it is very hard to predict the future. So it is not easy to say that we have a net positive impact or net negative impact. I fully agree with you. Okay, so related to that, so although we don't know whether technological progress has net positive impact on the employment or net negative impact, but it is sure that some types of job or skills will be obsolete because of technological progress. Then someone lose a job. Then the important question is how we prepare for the risks that our job could be replaced by machines and robots. And recently, World Economic Forum, famous for the Davos meeting, published a report. And it indicates that by 2025, the time spent on the current tasks at work by human beings and the machine will be the equal. So therefore, World Economic Forum argued that urgent investment in the human capital is needed to create a fairer world. So in your presentation, you just mentioned that the social intelligence is far from being fully automated. But in the meantime, there is increased demand for advanced cognitive skills. So the key question is, what is the best way, what is a good way to acquire these necessary skills? And I believe the way to acquire such a skill may differ between young generation and existing workers. So if you have some specific advice for them, could you please share with us?
Another excellent question for which many thanks. So we've studied this question of which skills will be in demand in the future. And I have a few takeaways from that study that I'd like to share. First and perhaps most important is that the future of skills is very heterogeneous in that there are many different niches of employment in the economy, and each of those niches will need very different skills mixes. So it's not true that there is a single skill that everybody needs. It's not that everyone needs to learn to program, for instance, although of course there's likely to be employment for those who can. But if I was to speak broadly about findings that generalize to many different types of work, I would say that yes, social intelligence, creativity is likely to become more important. The general theme is how can you become complementary to the robots rather than competitive with them? And what that means in practice is that many occupations might become more customer facing, more bespoke to the particular needs of a particular client, less cookie cutter, less routine in that sense. So analyzing which occupations might emerge, we found, for instance, one such occupation might be a sort of builder or construction worker, but one who has a much higher degree of social intelligence, perhaps working on a much more one-to-one tailored basis with particular clients. So yeah, how you acquire these skills is also a crucial question, in that national level retraining skills policy has not been very successful in the past, it's fair to say. And I would say, despite working in an educational institution, a university, as you do too, Professor Miyamoto, I wouldn't say that we're necessarily equipping students today with skills that will last them their entire careers. So I do think there's a lot of rethinking that needs to be done about how we train and retrain over the course of people's careers as the pace of technological change perhaps picks up and as careers become longer.
I see. Oh, thank you very much. Yep. Okay, so now let me move to the next topic. So now I would like to discuss the role of new technology in the aging society. I pick up this topic as the world is aging very rapidly. So due to the declining fertility and the rising life expectancies, many countries are now facing the aging of their populations. And according to the United Nations, there are about 700 million old people in the world at this moment, and it accounts for about 9% of world populations. And the number of elderly people will increase significantly, and it is expected to be about 1.6 billion by 2050. So that means within next 30 years, the number of elderly people will be more than doubles. And as you know, Japan is the most aged country at this moment. And the share of older person to the total population is about 29%. And then in a society where people live longer, they are more likely to work longer period. But however, due to, for example, health condition, someone could not work, although they are willing to do so. Then I think there are many rooms for new technology to help or facilitate older people to work. For example, telework provided a flexible working style, and it may promote employment of the elderly peoples. So, but there must be some other technologies. So if you have any thought, could you please share with us? So what kind of technology will be useful for employment for elderlies?
Oh, terrific question again, thank you. So the first thing I'd say is that the ideal case would be one in which AI makes us all so wealthy that we can all enjoy really long retirements and not work. But anticipating that that won't be true for everyone, I think it is important to consider this question of how technology might help keep people working for longer in their lives. And as you said, the key here is really health, and aging is really, in some respects, a journey of acquiring disabilities and illnesses. And for that reason, I think we need to consider what disability justice activists have been telling us for a long time about how to enable our workplaces to accommodate more people effectively. And really, the trick there is that there's not one size fits all, and not a one size fits all approach to work. We need to allow workplaces to become more flexible to accommodate people with many different needs and abilities. Elderly people, of course, have a lot of experience. So it's very attractive to try and keep them in the workplace if we can, all the knowledge and skills that they've acquired. And in order to do so, you've mentioned already the need for more flexible working, as might be achieved through remote working, certainly something that technology can assist, as for instance, we're working today over Zoom. Technology is also key to a lot of accessibility, which I think is key to encouraging the elderly to engage in work. So what that would mean is something like recording meetings, recording talks, allowing those to be viewed offline. Tools like Slack, for instance, are also very helpful in this respect.
Right.
I think also AI is key to just improving health, particularly in managing long-term chronic conditions. So I view AI as a core tool in allowing patients to gather sufficient data on their symptoms, on their conditions, to allow them to personalize any treatments to their particular needs.
That's right.
So I think more than anything, AI is a tool to enable better health at a population scale.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. So related to that, so not just, the world is aging rapidly, actually people live longer than before. So for example, when we look at the case of Japan, now life expectancy for Japanese is the longest in the world, almost the longest in the world. Females' life expectancy is around 87 years old, male is 82 or 81. And also according to our Ministry of Health and Labor and Welfare, the half of girls born in recent year will be live until 90 years old. So this is very surprising for me. So that means actually we are now entering age of 100 years life. So we will, I think that since we will live longer, we have to work longer. So then what do you think the working style in the longevity eras? So for example, so far, typical Japanese, and not only Japanese, I believe other country too, typical the person's life course composed of 3 stages: education, work, rest of life after retirement. So when we are young, we spend a lot of time to education. When we go to the high school, we go to the college. And after graduation, we start to work. We work until retirement ages. And once we retired, we will enjoy the rest of life. This is like a typical Japanese life course. But when people live longer, this style may not work anymore because the period in the old age become too long. So we have to work a longer period. But once we work longer period, we will face many changes. We will have more opportunity to some technological progress. So what would be the working style, a lifestyle in such eras?
Another really important question. And some of the themes I'd like to identify are those that we've already discussed. So certainly encouraging longer periods of good health is key. And I do believe there's a role for AI in doing so. I think also, as you've brought up yourself, we need to ensure that learning continues throughout a career. No longer can we have a single period of learning at the start of our careers which lasts us thereafter. We need to ensure that through work or through regular retraining, we're acquiring new skills. And perhaps AI is part of the solution there too. I mean, certainly the ability to watch videos on YouTube and read blog posts and so on allows self-education over the internet in a way that was not possible in the past. But I think another big part of the solution here has to be support. It has to be allowing people opportunities to go and retrain and acquire new skills. This is not something that should be left to the individual, beholden upon the individual. So in short, there is a big challenge to tackle here. I'm not exactly sure what we need to do, but we do know that there needs to be some sort of solution to the requirement to acquire new skills over the course of a career.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is very helpful to listen that. Okay, actually, I have tons of questions. This is a very good opportunity for me to ask, many questions to you. But since time is limited, and I will stop here. And actually, today we receive some questions from students, our audience. So now let me introduce some of them. So the first question comes from our high school student in Tokyo. So the question is, when jobs are replaced by AI, how do you think AI will be branded into the human society? Will it exist in the form of elaborate robots? This is the question from the high school students. So do you have any comments?
Thank you for the question. It's a great one. Historically, when AI has been developed, it's been put into production in a form in which it's no longer recognized as AI. So for instance, historically, you might have viewed something like an elevator, a lift, as being, a form of advanced technology powered by something that can think in the place of a human. But today we view it as entirely routine. In the same way, I think looking ahead, when a new technology, which now we call AI, is implemented, is sold, is put into the economy, it'll very rapidly stop being thought of as AI. It'll just be another tool that we use without thinking about it. So will there be elaborate robots? In some places, yes. Robots, of course, entail physical manipulation skills, which might be needed for some tasks. But I think in most cases, we'll stop thinking about them as robots in the same way we don't think of many of our kitchen appliances today as robots. We don't think of a food processor or a dishwasher as a robot anymore. They're just appliances. So I think AI, it only remains AI for a short period of time before it becomes far too common for us to really recognize it as such.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me ask one more question. This question comes from the student in our university. The question is, in future society, how should we cope with AI? This is the question. Actually, we already discussed some of them, but if you want to add something, please answer to these questions.
No, again, it's a really important question. And working in AI myself, I'm an engineer by background. It's really dismaying to me to see fear surround the topic of AI. Because while I agree there are concerns that we need to address, and I've been part of raising those concerns myself, I think it's more important that we recognize these technologies as not just a desirable part of our future, but almost an essential part of achieving the future that we want. We need these technologies to address many of the global challenges we currently face. So while I think it's important to be concerned about the ways in which AI might be affecting employment, for instance, we need to address that topic not with fear, but with optimism, in that AI is not just immiserating us, it's potentially the best tool we have for making us prosperous. It's automating away work that in some senses is below the dignity of human beings. It's automating away work that we shouldn't be doing.
Thank you very much. Actually, it is very unfortunately, but it is time to close our sessions. So although it was short time, we had a really good discussion. We have fruitful discussion. I personally enjoyed it very much, and technological progress affects our economy and society, and more importantly, it affects everyone's lifestyle and careers. So I'm very happy if today's our discussion is helpful for the audience. So finally, I would like to ask Mike to give some message to the audience. So Mike, the floor is yours.
Well, addressing an audience of young people, I thought I should emphasize that your century, this century, is one that will be defined in many ways by AI. But what that century turns out to be, what form the AI takes, is up to you. The future is yours to play for. So please learn about AI, learn about what it can do for you, and learn what risks it poses, but then make sure that it's working for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike.
No, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for the really stimulating conversation, Professor Miyamoto. Thank you.
With that, we will now conclude today's lecture. Professor Osborne and Professor Miyamoto, thank you for your excellent lecture.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.